But if it was question of work of long duration, of letters to write, and of plans to develop, he had his secretary awaken and continued to walk up and down with his hands behind his back, dictated. Often in the middle of the work, he had chocolate and ices brought in, never coffee, which he only took at meals, or even something more substantial for every evening. A sort of mixed meal was prepared, consisting of a roast fowl, of 2 entremets of dessert, and a half bottle of champagne. He invited his secretary to share his collation, and beginning to talk, opened his mind as to the future, and amused himself by thinking over his dreams out loud. Often, when he had taken an ice, he asked for a bath, which was always kept ready to turn on, and whether he lay down again after the bath or whether he remained up, he never exceeded 6 hours of sleep, allowing that out of the 24 hours he devoted 3 to meals, to spectacles, to women, and to diversion, which is without doubt an excess of the truth. There remained 15 for work. 18, said Roederer, who knew him well, for he worked everywhere, while dining, at the ball, at the theater. Napoleon was the man of his time, and no doubt of all time, who gave the least to the body and the most to the mind. This does not explain the importance of his work, but it allows us to form an opinion of its vastness. Sunday, it required very exceptional circumstances to induce Napoleon to interrupt his work during the week, or to allow himself any distraction or change of his usual habits of life. It was only when he felt the physical want of violent exercise, such as the chase, or when he recognized the necessity of showing himself to the people and of awaking impressions in the nations which were tending to get weaker, or when curiosity prompted him to visit some building which he had ordered, or to satisfy himself about some great operation of road making which he had projected, or to make personal inquiries as to the state of public feeling, and to make an incognito tour of his capital, following the example of the Caliph of Caliphs, accompanied by Frederic only, his Jafar. Such fancies are with him of the rarest occurrence, and in the usual way it is a sedentary and recluse life which he leads at the Tuileries. There was not even that distraction which was necessary for him, a short walk in the garden. This garden was public. If the consul or emperor appeared in it, a crowd quickly did also gather round him and made a train. It was only on the condition of Marie Louise, which made him during the later months of 1810 have a terrace reserved at the edge of the water, which could be reached from the palace by a specially constructed underground passage, and even then, as soon as the empress left the Tuileries for St. Cloud, the terrace was restored to the public. If they were late in opening the gates, the emperor had means of his own to remind them of his orders, which did not admit of any answer. Thus, through all the week, it was a life between walls. Nearly the whole of it passed in the work cabinet and in the inner apartment, a life in which, as it were, etiquette played no part, and of which the hours flew away, rushing at the rate of a charge at a gallop, under the heavy whips of the couriers who brought dispatches from all corners of Europe. But on Sunday, the emperor passed the whole of the day outside his apartment, showing himself to the court, the people, and the army, to foreign powers, to everybody. It is different kind of work, less calculated to please him. It is that part of the duty of a sovereign, which most kings look on as necessary, but which he would be tempted to regard as superfluous, for it is the reality of power which he loves before everything. And if he now and then amused his fancy with the pomps of processions and the regulation of ceremonies, he soon got tired of such pastime, and in that which he supposed he could not find some amusement or pride, he only experienced unequaled weariness by crowding in to the same day all the outward duties of sovereignty. He takes as little as he can from the hours of effective sovereignty, those which concern his empire and himself, and he does enough to support the dignity of the crown, to maintain etiquette, to put himself at the disposal of courtiers, to prove to all that he is present, to play the part of emperor, and to fill the post of chief of inspector, and even a principal instructor of the soldiery. He keeps the morning for himself, which passes in the usual way. His toilet is the same as on every other day, and his costume identical, except on days of ceremony, he puts on his grand cordon of the Legion of Honor over his coat instead of putting it under, and that his coat is frequently that of Grenadier instead of Chasseur de Levée. The audience is a déjeuner all go on as during the week, but at midday he leaves his private apartment. The Empress has already gone to the chapel, and is quite a procession which accompanies her in front walker pages and the equerries and the chamberlains of the princesses, followed by her own equerries and her chamberlain on the ordinary and extraordinary duty, and on her right, a little behind the first equerry and the first almoner, at her left, Lady of Honor, followed by the princesses, the lady of the bedchamber, the ladies of the palace, and ladies in attendance of the princesses. A few minutes later, the emperor, having been informed, takes the same road, and his procession is more numerous still. At the head, the pages and the governor, the master of the ceremonies, and his assistant, the equerries, the prefect of the palace, the chamberlains, the governor of the palace, the chamberlain, and the equerry of the day, the aide-de-camp on duty, and finally, following the 5 grand officers of the crown, the emperor. He is followed immediately by the colonel general of the guard on duty and by the grand almoner, and then come the princes of the imperial family, the princes of the empire, the colonel general of the guard, his aides-de-camp, who were not on duty, the first almoner, and the officers of the princes. From the throne room, the procession turns towards the grand staircase, lined on both sides with a hedge of foot soldiers of the guard. He crosses the guard of the guards, passes between the statues of silence and meditation, ascends the staircase to the hall of the council of state, enters into that hall by a large and splendid doorway, and from thence enters the imperial tribune of the chapel, which is close by it. The door of the hall of the council of state is reserved for the emperor. He alone passes through it on Sunday with his court when he comes from mass, on weekdays, accompanied only by the chamberlain on duty when he goes to preside over the council of state. Now and then these two processions unite. Then the emperor, the empress, the princes and princesses assemble in the throne room. In the first antechamber, the salon, which precedes this hall, the persons attached to the persons of the princes, the members of the Senate and of the Council of State, and the general officers wait. In the second antechamber, deputies, tribunes, judges, and officers who have access to the court. When the emperor, giving his hand to the empress, leaves the throne room, the officers of the empress walk before the officers of the emperor. But the route followed is the same with the grand staircases to go down and up again, so favorable for the sumptuous development of imperial theories, but along which, unfortunately, the emperor, always in a hurry, walks too quickly and takes away from this pomp a little of its dignity. On the passage of the empress, when she comes along, the drums beat. A second roll announces the arrival of the sovereign, before whom the usher, opening the door, calls out, "The emperor!"